Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Get It Done podcast. I'm your host, Jimi Ryan. We're living in an age of entertainment. And if you've ever seen popular shows like Game of Thrones, Sopranos, or The Wire, you're probably familiar with HBO. And that's what makes our episode today so special. I'm honored to introduce our guest, former HBO executive, Harvard graduate, and the new Chief Content Officer at Fairway, Kirby Bradley. Kirby, welcome to the Get It Done podcast.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
For sure. So just to open up with, if you could explain, Kirby, what a chief content officer is, I guess, what would you be telling them?
Sure. I mean, I see my role as creating content in the form of video, print, digital, social, anything that tells the story of Fairway. And when I say tell the story of Fairway, that's the message that we want to get out that shows how Fairway helps people get into homes. And we feel that there are a lot of great opportunities to tell stories that will really appeal to people in different categories of buyers. And we look to really increase the amount of content that we're doing over the next year.
That's awesome. So HBO has a reputation of being a premier entertainment, and overall a brand that produces high-level content. Can you talk about one or two things that you've learned while working for HBO and how they can be applied to a brand strategy in 2021?
Yeah, I mean, working at HBO for about 25 years, early on, I learned the basics of storytelling. And really, any good story has the component of conflict and resolution. It's a story about somebody who's overcoming an obstacle. And you want to hear what ends up happening because the person is in a situation where they can't get to where they want to be or they're in danger. And so you follow their story through. And we found most of my programming at HBO is sports related, but we never gave the score of a game. It was never about the game itself. It was always those stories behind the scenes. And in fact, the stories we told had nothing to do about sports. It just so happened that the people in them were athletes or coaches or whatever. But we learned to tell stories that were just compelling and people were interested in watching or listening to. And when I decided to pitch the idea of coming to Fairway and playing the role of this chief content officer, I knew that there were great stories at Fairway too, because you think about the biggest moments in people's lives, a lot of them center around when they buy their first home or they buy a home for their family. And that process often involves obstacles, challenges, things go wrong. You don't know if you're going to qualify. You don't know if you're going to get it. And so I just knew that there was a lot of great material here that could show how when people are in those situations, Fairway can help them.
Have you ever had any mortgage experience in the past?
Yeah, I mean, I live in New York City, and so I've purchased homes here in the city, and I've also purchased homes out in the country several times, and pretty much every time had an awful experience. Nothing really went wrong. It was just that the people I was dealing with were not pleasant, and they seemed like they really didn't like their jobs, and they made it kind of miserable every step of the way. And yeah, go ahead.
Well, that's great because it's just at Fairway, and I know that you know this because I'm fairly confident you know Jake for a long time, and he has a culture that everybody's for each other. Everybody's on the team. We're all part of this experience, and that's something where I think that you can get those better stories. However, has there been a story that's really hit close to heart? Because mortgages tends to be rather bland. It's something that if you're looking at it on your Facebook, you're going to maybe scroll past it. What makes somebody not scroll past, and what makes it a real story that they can relate to?
Yeah, I mean, I've had the privilege of doing a whole bunch of those stories over the last year and a half, because before I came on staff at Fairway, I was creating these videos called Fairway Stories. And yeah, I mean, I've come across some wonderful stories. There's a woman in Massachusetts who her family escaped from Brazil because there was so much violence there when she was a teenager. She was just such a hard worker. She worked jobs throughout high school. She and her husband started a business. They employ several families now in a construction business. She's a dental hygienist. And they found this home when they had a baby that they could move into. But just because of some bureaucracy, her working permit that she had applied for on time hadn't been processed. And she was buying that home. That homeowner was selling it and purchasing another home. There was another family that was involved in that. And all their deals blew up because the lender that she was working with had no interest in trying to solve her problem. They just said, oh, there's nothing we can do. It's just, so somebody directed them to Fairway, and a loan officer named Michael Dunsky just said, tell me your story. And she was, on top of everything else, she was having another baby that week. And all this was happening at the same time. Well, Fairway helped that family, and they took care of it. They said, there's no reason you shouldn't qualify. We understand the issue. We're going to help you. And there's so many stories like that where, and it always has this common element where Fairway listened when the other company just said, we can't help you. There's nothing we can do. Well, there's always something you can do.
Yeah, there's countless stories like that at Fairway for sure. And I love how you said it. Fairway helped, like they listened, they cared, and it's a real thing. That's awesome. Moving on, the marketing and entertainment world, they're full of metrics, and some are more important than others. For example, time listened might be a more valuable metric than a simple 3-second video view. That being said, what are 1 or 2, 3 even key metrics that you're using or you're looking at of value in the 2021 landscape?
Well, I'm going to answer that in a roundabout way. I mean, one of our biggest initiatives at Fairway in the marketing area is that we're going to be doing business very differently than Fairway ever has before. We're talking to ad agencies now. We're planning a marketing strategy where our first step is to really work on what the Fairway brand is. Fairway has a lot of great stories. It has a lot of values, core values that you see on every Fairway wall, and people talk about them and really believe them. But there are a lot of them, and it sometimes makes it hard to crystallize that message and really focus the message of who and what Fairway is. That's what we're going to be doing first of all, is really working on that over the next 2 or 3 months until we kind of crystallize it down into an easy to understand small message. And then we're going to start weaving that into our efforts to get the word out. And as far as metrics go, there are different ways that we can determine what our awareness level is in different markets. And that's one of the first things that we're going to be doing, is trying to find a base of knowledge. Who knows about Fairway now? And then over the course of the next year, our goal obviously is going to be able to raise that much higher.
So to just a little bit further into that, how do you determine awareness? And I guess how do you look at the scoreboard of that? I have to imagine that's a hard thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's not my area of expertise, but the companies that do that, they essentially do a form of a poll. I mean, they go out into the market and they ask people, have you ever heard of, or they probably do it differently. They probably say, which mortgage lenders are you familiar with?
Right.
And, rather than giving them a leading answer. But the point is they figure out where we stand in the landscape against, the ones that are obviously the most known are Rocket Mortgage and Quicken.
Right.
And we're down the list, and we're way further down the list than we are, commensurate with our volume. We're the biggest lender you've never heard of. Well, we want to change that. We have to change that if we're going to reach our goals.
Absolutely. I think that's brilliant. If you were actually here, if I tell you to think of one of the best marketing campaigns that you've ever seen, what comes to mind and why?
Living in New York, I see one that you probably haven't seen, but there's a chain of hospitals in New York called New York Presbyterian. And for probably close to 10 years now, they've had an ad campaign that is the simplest campaign I've ever seen. All it is a black and white video of someone sitting in a chair telling their story of coming to Columbia Presbyterian Hospital in a time of crisis. And nobody else said that they could deal with their form of cancer or their accident repercussions, broken limbs, and how Columbia Presbyterian helped them. And they obviously spend a lot of time screening people for the right ones who tell a story really well. But it's just a simple story, 60-second spot. They tell a story of facing that obstacle and then how Columbia Presbyterian helps them. And I don't know how they do it, because I always know exactly that it's Columbia Presbyterian. There's so many ads that I watch and I like, but I can't tell you who they're for, because I don't make the connection in my mind between the company paying for it, which is a huge disaster for that company. But this one always stands out to me. And I don't know that that's the way we'll go in our marketing campaign eventually, but it would be one way, because we have so many examples of people who could just talk about how they were hopeless trying to buy their house, things were falling apart, and then Fairway helped.
It's going to be a challenging enough thing just to pick the best ones. To dig a little bit deeper into that, I feel like mortgage, we are guilty of being either too flashy or really just boring. And like, there's no real in between. And I think that in between is really that story that you're talking about, more of the heart and soul. And when you're doing this, I guess, are you asking people just to tell their story about what it was and that's it? Or is that, are you going deeper with it, with how it felt? And are you making the other people feel it? Are you going deep with it? Or is it really just kind of surface level?
Well, in the videos that I've been doing in the last year, it goes into a deeper level, because these are longer videos. Most of them, each story is 5 or 6 minutes. So we have the time to really ask in-depth questions and get a fairly nuanced explanation of how things went. But you can do that in a shorter format too. It's harder. You have to have the right person telling the story, but you can frame it in a shorter version where it still really has that impact and really resonates with those who hear it.
That's great. What is one hard skill and one soft skill that you believe will be in demand in the next 5 years?
Well, I don't know marketing terms and things like that, even though I'm in marketing, but I think I know what you mean. So let me give it a shot. Soft skills, I mean, is emotional, what's the word I'm looking for?
Intelligence.
Emotional intelligence, being able to, I'll start that over. In soft skills, I think emotional intelligence is really important. And that just means being able to listen to somebody, being able to disagree with someone, and be able to navigate that conversation. And I say this because, sadly, our country is very polarized now, but we're in business and we have to do business with everyone if we're going to succeed. And so there will be times when you're talking to someone that, if you take the conversation in a different direction, it might not work. But people who can sense that, who can navigate it, it doesn't matter what side you're on, what side they're on. If you can have a successful conversation where you connect with them and, achieve what you want to in that conversation, that's important. Hard skills, I mean, the technical side obviously is changing all the time. And it's absolutely, vital to be able to, we have so many platforms now in Fairway. When you learn them, they save you time, they increase your efficiency. Not everyone's willing to take the time and make the investment in learning them, but for those who do, it opens up a new world.
That's a great answer. I love it. And yeah, that's absolutely where I was going with it. If you were to start a podcast about anything, what would it be about?
Well, interesting you say that. I'm starting a podcast this week. And by the time this dribbles out, we're starting a podcast with Steve Jacobson. And I am going to be fielding questions from Fairway employees, just anything about the company, anything about the mortgage business, a few here and there about Steve himself. And Steve and I are just going to have a conversation for 20 or 25 minutes. and then that will be available to Fairway employees. But the idea is just to hopefully create a little more sense of community within Fairway. It's a company that's moving toward 10,000 employees now. And those who've been around a long time, they know all the old stories, they know the origin stories, but a lot of the new people have only heard, bits and pieces of that. And I think there's a lot of curiosity about, where the company's headed specifically. So we're going to do this. We're going to do 3 or 4 of them and see how it goes. And if it's well received, we'll hopefully do it on a weekly basis.
Well, I tell you what, with Jake on board, he has the book, Keep Playing. I actually I've read every one of these emails in the morning when they come through, and it's like, here, just have him talk for 25 minutes straight. Just hit record, and then just get out of the way.
I think I'll probably ask one question, and just so you know, the name of the podcast is #Keep Playing.
Well, we're gonna put links to that in this podcast. I have another question. Might be a little off. I'm genuinely curious about someone who goes to Harvard. It's kind of just a different thing. Not everybody makes it there. Tell me about your morning routine. What does the first hour of your day look like?
I tend to be an early riser. I probably wake to my alarm once every 3 weeks, meaning that I just wake up earlier. Don't know why, but I typically just walk out and answer any emails that came overnight, and then look at my schedule and plot my day, and just make sure that the schedule makes sense. Am I jamming too much in here? Is there an open space there that I should be filling with something more productive? And then I take a walk for an hour whenever possible, just to get some air and clear my head and think a little bit, and then come back and dive in.
Cool, excellent. So we want to be super respectful of your time, and there are a few questions that we ask everybody that comes through. So I'm gonna roll with it. First is, do you feel like you ever got a big break?
Absolutely. I mean, I've gotten a lot of big breaks, but the break that got me into television, I had a friend who I was lost in my professional career for years. I was bouncing from job to job. I was in retail. I was working in marketing. And I thought to myself, it would be fun to be in TV, but I had no idea how to do that. But then I had a friend who was working at the Olympics, and there was an opening for a low-level position, and he offered it to me. And I got that job. That was my first TV job. And then that led to a more semi-permanent job, and then that led to a staff position at HBO. So that was a big break. I never would have been able to do that on my own.
That's awesome. What was the name of that guy?
Michael Bass.
That's awesome. Cool. Shout out, Michael. Was there ever a time, Kirby, you thought about giving up?
Yeah. The broadcast television can be a very cruel place sometimes. I struck out on my own several years ago from HBO. I continued to work for them as a consultant, but I started my own business. And it can be hard pitching ideas, because while there's more TV now than there is ever, it's it's very specific about what they want, and it can be discouraging. And especially when you're not part of a team anymore, when you're on your own. So there were many times when I just wondered whether it was worth it or not to keep pushing and keep pushing. I think most people feel that way at different times.
I love the answer everybody has. Everybody has a different answer. No, it's not wrong. You could say no, I never have, or you could say yeah, I have. And it's always interesting to hear what people say. And I have to imagine broadcasting's got to be cool. I mean, imagine you put your heart and soul into an idea, you pitch it, and they tell you it's stupid. I mean, and I'm sure a lot are actually stupid. So like, I mean, what's the balance?
Yeah, it's a weird industry. I mean, you are only as good as your last project, and people tend to be followers. If there's a successful show, then all the other networks want to do that same kind of show, and that's all they want. And then they put that show into production, but it fails. So then they move in a different direction. Nobody really ever knows what they want, which is the frustrating thing about it. But I was really fortunate at HBO to, early in my career there, we started a show called Real Sports with Brian Gumbel. And that show lasted, it's still going. But that was kind of my rock for a long time. And I felt very blessed to be part of a long running show like that because it, lent consistency to my career, and it was a good show and it was really fun to work on. So I got lucky there too.
Yeah, that seems like another like total big break type of situation.
Yeah.
That's super cool. All right, to set it up. Actually, no, I got this one. So if you were to do it all over again, Kirby, what would you change?
I, I grew up in a small town. I grew up in the same town Steve Jacobson did, and our upbringings are probably pretty similar. We didn't have any idea what you could do in life, and I never thought about my career. And consequently, when I got out of school, I didn't really have any idea what I wanted to do, and that's why I bounced around. So I don't know if I would, it presupposes having the wisdom to make those decisions as a teenager or someone in your 20s, but I would think a lot more about what I wanted to do in my career and then think about what steps you need to take to prepare for that because I really wasn't prepared for anything when I came out.
So put differently, you maybe would have thought things through a little bit further before you just threw yourself at it type or?
Yeah, and that's not saying much. I didn't really think them through at all. So yes, even a little basic amount of thinking it through probably would have helped.
Okay, that's beautiful. So set the last question up. There is someone out there that wants to work at HBO. They want to be a chief content officer. They want to go to Harvard. Who knows, whatever it is that they're looking to do. What advice would you give to someone looking to get it done?
Well, first of all, create a clear goal. And you have to understand that if your goal is to go to Harvard or Yale or Princeton or Stanford, you may be perfectly qualified for that and you still don't get it. And because those places, they don't have enough spots for the qualified people that could go there. And that's a hard thing for a lot of people to take. They take the rejection to mean that they didn't think you were good enough, when for a certain segment of people, it's not true. But I would say, like, choosing your goal to be something like working at HBO or something like that, it's probably more achievable. The first thing is you have to educate yourself on what you need to be, what you need to do to be prepared for that. What would make you an interesting candidate for them? What would make them be attracted to you as an employee? And using the chief content officer role I have with Fairway now, I kind of came up with that idea having worked with Fairway for a year or so. And I thought, here's a company that's dynamic, it's growing, it's super successful, but they need to get their story out more. And that's what I do. And I couldn't go to them and say, I can run all of your advertising purchases. Not that they really did that much at that point, but that's not my expertise. My expertise is knowing how to tell a story, how to get a message across. And there was a big open space for that at Fairway. So that's how I made the pitch to them, that this will work with what other things you're doing, but it will complement them and give it more power. So sometimes you just have to look for a need that maybe the company itself doesn't even know they have, and try to fill that.
That's fire. And I see why Jake is so excited to have you on board. And I'm genuinely excited to see, what you come up with and where Fairway's at in the next, 6 months even.
Well, I am too. I mean, I'm super excited. It's been really fun. It's been a whirlwind this first month, just, learning the ins and outs of how to do things. I'm still, a lot of my efforts are trying to figure stuff out, but the people are fantastic, and the attitude that everybody has is so positive, which is like really refreshing.
For sure. So I want to thank everyone for joining us today, and I want to especially thank Kirby. And if anybody is looking to connect with Kirby, how would you like people to reach out?
Yeah, just send me an email, kirby.bradley@fairwaymc.com. Would be happy to hear from you.
All right, beautiful. So I want to again thank you, Kirby, for being here. And if you're still listening, you must have thought that this has been nothing short of amazing. And we appreciate those 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts. And you can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere that you listen to podcasts. And if you would like to support the show, please tell a friend, write that 5-star review, hit the subscribe button. All those things make a huge difference in helping us reach more people. Once again, I'm Jimi Ryan. Thank you again for listening. Many more stories on the way.